like to invite everybody to meet Matthew Willman with his amazing collection of black and white analog photographs. And he's going to be showing us today some of the works he's going to have up at this year's Analog Festival. Thank you so much, Matthew. And thanks for being willing to do a proper big exhibition next year. I think we left it all a bit late this year, seeing that there's been a lot else going on. But let me leave it over to you. Explain to me a little bit about what you're going to be presenting us at this year's Analog Festival.
Amazing. Graham, thank you for the opportunity. It's always great to connect with like-minded people in this industry. A bit of background maybe to start, for those who don't know me. I think that's everyone. My name is Matthew Willman. I'm 44 years old now. I have been committed to photography since I was 18 years old. I studied at Natal Technikon. I currently live in KwaZulu-Natal. And then thereafter completing at Natal Tech under Malcolm Lyle, Vic Waite, and the guys, I went straight into documentary photography. I started a master's in visual communication, but an extraordinary opportunity happened when I was 23. I got in as a commission photographer to the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and basically left everything behind, and I jumped in with that opportunity, and I helped build through the visual discourse of photography the legacy of Nelson Mandela, which we call the Mandela Center of Memory. It's like a presidential library. And I have worked in the field of documentary for the last 26 years, and that has afforded me opportunities to work in 48 countries, work with organizations like the United Nations, UNICEF, World Vision, World Health Organization, Oxfam, food security programs, water security programs, anything from child-headed households to malaria to AIDS. So it's been a full-on career to date. As a photographer, it is how I see the world, how I interpret the world, how I engage with the world, how I language my way in the world. I've written 5 books on the topic in and around photography and my career to date. Most importantly, through photography, I have enabled the blossoming and the growth of an arts trust. It's a foundation arts trust, which I sell my work, and the funds there basically raises money to pay forward what I've been blessed with in this career. And we currently have students around the world who themselves are avid photographers and also actually ballet dancers, because for 21 years of my life, I was a professionally trained ballet dancer as well. So I certainly have had an eclectic career. And so the hobby part of my photography is I photograph ballet around the world. And I've released in 2019 an exceptional book called Private Space, which is a documentary on my work with ballet dancers, representing 42 nations, 88 dancers for the 10 top ballet companies in the world. So that is a superb book. Unfortunately, that whole collection is digital and not analog. But I began my career in analog. And for those of you who are interested, at the Mandela Foundation, we stayed analog for as long as possible for the purposes of authenticity. And remember when digital started, and even today, that big, huge question still remains. How do we archive digital? So for as long as possible, up until about a year and a half before Madiba passed in 2013, all my work was analog. And it's now housed at the Nelson Mandela Foundation in Johannesburg. But that being said, I went digital in about, when did I go digital? 2009, probably late in the game for a professional. And yet I merge between the two genres of photography, between digital and between analog. I have my own darkroom here in KwaZulu-Natal, and I specialize in creating one-of-one prints of my work. And I have the privilege through Graham and interacting, and also through your connections, Graham, Coco van Apen, that I came to know the Barrydale Analog Film Festival. And it's been about 2 years that I've known about what you guys have been up to. And as soon as I got in touch with Graham, it was a no-brainer. I just really fell in love with the idea of becoming a part and sharing what I have to offer as a photographer here in South Africa. As you know, we share a great legacy and history in analog photography, or in photography in South Africa, particularly during the anti-apartheid movements and various others. What I'm bringing 3 works to the Barrydale Film Festival, Analog Festival this year. I'm very excited to share them. It's the first time I'm exhibiting them. Are 3 works from out of various aspects of my career over the last 26 years. The first image you see here is a hand-printed silver gelatin image. Printed, it was from a 35mm 400 ISO black and white negative. I think it was Ilford, probably was. And it forms part of a larger collection of the Ananda heritage, which is the birthplace of our democracy in South Africa. It was where the African National Congress was founded, where Mahatma Gandhi lived and worked and began his passive resistance policies. It's basically our heritage, as opposed to the Western Cape has Robben Island as a heritage site. So this collection, it's about a 45-piece collection that I shot on film, 35mm, and have now up until this date, I have never hand printed it. The work was, as you know, what happens, the negatives get scanned and you end up using the negatives. We end up using the scan work. So this is a rare portrait work of documenting my work in the Ananda heritage around the communities. The Ananda, incidentally, is the largest migrant labor force in our country, representing about 22 different nationalities living and working, not only in the African community, but in the Indian as well, through Phoenix and various other joined suburbs in this area. So it's a wonderful documentation of you hear a woman washing her clothes in the late afternoon sunlight. This was documented over 6 months that I worked from a summer into a winter in this community. So that is the first one, a beautiful African portrait. And then the next one is, let me do this one, is something perhaps closer to Barrydale. It's in Paternoster. Hopefully you can get closer to it. It's a beautiful hand-printed medium format, printed on obviously silver gelatin, of a fisherman, a cray fisherman in Paternoster, about to leave his place of dwelling in the midday to go out and to farm where he catches these crayfish on the west coast of South Africa. Absolutely love this photograph. As I said, all my works in my analog work is all only printed once. I don't believe in too much reproduction of my work. So those of you who will see this will only know that this is the only one in existence. A very still, beautiful photograph that I printed. Oh, by the way, so I use Canon for my 35mm and A1, and then I use a Mamiya RB67, the old workhorse. I've got a few backs which I put onto it. I've got some beautiful lenses for it. It's my absolute baby. I was in Mozambique shooting with it a couple of years ago, and up in one of the airports that took us down to Maputo, the security wouldn't allow me through because they thought, one, it was a gun, and then the guy said, no, it's a big bomb. So the camera definitely speaks for itself. It's a hard little thing to work with, a big machine to work with, but I absolutely adore it. It's just spot on every single time. So that's the second work I'll be bringing to you this year. And then the last one, I'm very excited to share with you. I have cropped it. I have printed it like a 35mm, but it's actually a medium format print. It's an incredible portrait. As I said, it's a one of one. This is Mrs. Manyehu. She, previous to me working with her, she had never met a white person before. Now, her legacy is part of her communities. She's a Kisamburu, part of the Maasai clan that lives in the far northern reaches on the border of Eritrea, in the Danakil Desert, where Lake Turkana is. Those of you who know northern Kenya into Ethiopia and the South Sudan. She's an Amharic. She's a Kisamburu woman, an elder in the community, and I was working there documenting, I think it was 10 years ago now, in this community, looking at food security and water security projects funded by World Food Programme and the United Nations, UNAP they call it, but that's irrelevant. And it took us about 3 days to gain their confidence for me to work with the community in creating these portraits. And this one was what I absolutely love about it is the fact is that it looks like it's been shot in a studio, but it was in one of their, I don't think you call them rondavels there, but huts, their mobile houses. And the front light was a doorway, and the back light, the rim light that you see on her shoulder and the back of her head, is a window light. So creating almost like a softbox effect, harder and softer on the back. So I'm very excited. I've never exhibited this work, and until recently had never printed it, hand printed it. As I said, it all gets digitally scanned. And what I like to include in all my works, which I'm very excited about, you'll notice that I don't sign the front of my works. I feel that can be distracting. I know a lot of collectors would like to see artists and photographers sign the front of their works, but I sign the back. Nice HB pencil, 7B or whatever they call it. I sign and date the back. I put a little story in the back, but in the front, on the bottom right-hand corner, you can't see it in this thing. Oh, maybe if I turn the light adequately, there is a foil. There is an emboss of my just very understated, if you only look at it in the light, do you get to see it? It's just my emblem, MW, Matthew Willman, and that's all you see on the front of the works. So, so from medium format to 35mm, black and white is something I'm passionate about. As we all know, it's a very expensive game, but it's an exciting game. And I have the privilege of lecturing to students around the world and here in South Africa along the lines of photography and how we can use it as a medium of discourse and how it's coming up in the art world. I have had the privilege of exhibiting in about 22 countries around the world, not only just on Mandela, but on my work across the board. And people have a huge affinity and an affiliation as soon as you come to talk about analog and the art of it, because we appreciate AI and digital is certainly becoming a challenge for those of us who are very fundamentally what's the word? Traditional. Yeah, in our careers in photography. Yeah. And I think this is only going to add value to what we are creating and creating festivals like the Barrydale Analog Festival. So I'm excited. So Graham, it certainly is a privilege. Although I won't be there with you this year, as I will be abroad until about the 20th of December. Next year, I'll be coming in gung-ho on my horse and hopefully have a very successful event on that. I have a beautiful analog website. So I have my commercial website, which is just matthewwillman.co.za. But then I have this, I've just launched it actually. It's called the Willman Collection, WILLMAN collection.com. I've gone for the .com site. And it's just beautiful collections of my hand-printed works. Very detailed. You can click on them. There's zoomed up pictures. You can see the back. You can see the embossing. But in terms of using it commercially, no, it's all digital, as you know, today. But for me, the analog is there's a huge passion. I start a new project with my analog called the Great Lands Collection, which I'm starting in January next year. So I definitely, as a photographer, am moving very much into the realm of analog and would like to see not only what I'm doing to grow, but also to work with others and to inspire each other in this incredible field. I had the privilege of working, there's many obviously photographers I never met, which are in my career because I think I was too young during their heyday, but I had the privilege of working with Alf Kamalo, Peter Magoban, Jürgen Schadeberg, wow. Incredible photographers who added so much value to our history across the board. Yeah, exactly. Even photographers who were commissioned with Pierre Botha or Forster. It's just, I'm fascinated by who we are and what we've shaped ourselves to be. I mean, I spent 18 months living and working on Robben Island wow. with my analog camera because I needed to understand who these men were that came out of prison preaching forgiveness. I have taken perhaps some of the most celebrated images of Nelson Mandela. Many of you know his iconic Amandla fist or his open hand, which became Mandela's 46664 HIV/AIDS campaign. And these are to be celebrated as South African creations in this field. What is very inspiring for me is to see our colleges, whether it's Stellenbosch Academy or Natal Technikon, have actually reintroduced dark rooms and have made it part of their curriculum and academia, that they seek, they're rebuilding these wonderful nodes where dark rooms and magic can happen. So that's very encouraging, particularly in this day and age.
Well, that's why I also want to say that I was privileged last year to have a drum magazine exhibition, which was all the best of drum. And there we had those same people you've actually physically met. We had the originals up, very, very amazing. And that did inspire a lot of youth, that had come to see it, to actually see that if it wasn't for those African photographers that had picked up cameras over the last 60, 80 years, none of what had happened would have been recorded. That knowledge and what you've done would never have been there because there was no digital. So analog has an amazing, part of capturing our past and our legacies.
Oh, brilliant. I was talking actually to Bra Alf Kamalo, who sadly passed away, and he documented a lot into the Soweto, the uprisings in the 60s and 70s. And I say to him, look, when I get harassed by people, like I ran across Durban International runway when I was younger. I shouldn't have done that. I had to get bailed out. But I took the roll of film and I put it back in its canister and I chucked it back over the fence before I was caught by the police. And I was saying to Alf, now you just take the memory card out, the USB, and then you can just, put in your pocket or something and you can hide it. Whereas he was telling me when the secret police were after him or they used to ransack him, how he used to hide these spools of film all over the place like a chipmunk. He said it was pretty amazing. We'll chat soon. Thanks, Graham.
Cheers. Keep well.